Thank you for coming here. My name is Bob Milne, and I'm only playing this piano tonight because one of you isn't playing it right now. I'll see if I can put this in here. Yeah, maybe. Listen out of here. Well, I thought I'd start off with a little number by the famous Uday Bowman. I hear silence. He was out of Kansas City. He wrote a couple of nice tunes, including a piece called the 12th Street Rag. So a lot of stuff that I learned, I'm self-taught, so I learned by listening to player pianos when I was much younger. So a lot of my stuff tends to sound like a player piano. So here's the 12th Street Rag. All right. I would like to thank Nick and the boys for getting this player piano for me tonight. I can't do that anymore. Ragtime, of course, the most famous name. Left over from the ragtime years, Scott Joplin. Easy Winners, 1902, St. Louis. I actually ran into a guy out in California this stuff is called ragtime. This stuff has got an amazing history. Ragtime, it was an old 1890s expression that meant ragged time. Now, what that means is it was their way of saying that the melodies land in between the beats. Now you know. Okay, some of you might not have got that. Okay, so the learned word for that is syncopation, syncopated music. Now you can explain it to your friends. By the way, ragtime came from the folk music section. It didn't come from Beethoven or anybody of that type. It's folk music that came out of America. What does that mean, melodies landed in between the beats? Well, the best way for me the easiest way I can't explain it, so I have to demonstrate it. Okay, the beat is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, like the conductor. And if you listen to a march, here is the beat, 2, 3, 4, 1. Now I'm going to play a little bit of the Stars and Stripes kind of slowly, and I want you to notice that the melody notes are going to land right on top of those beats. See that? Well, classical music is like that. The same thing. Basically I'm just saying that it's not syncopated. Okay, now these folk musicians in America, in the deep south where we are even, they started playing a style way back in the 1800s. We can't trace it, but their melodies were landing in between the beats. Well, it started becoming popular, and they were publishing this stuff in the 1890s. The classicists were having great difficulty with it. They hated it because, for one thing, it wasn't written out, most of it. And then the second place, when it was, they couldn't play it. It was just too different. So the classicists started using the phrase, they said, they're not very good down there, are they? They play in a very ragged time. Yeah, that's where ragtime came from. So now I'm going to play a short little piece. It's called Southern Dance. And in this one, you're going to hear the beat going 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. But in this case, listen for when the melody lands. You're going to hear the left hand land right in back of it, because they're not very good. Get this out of my way. Following along, okay. So tomorrow or whatever, when you try and explain this to your friends, if they can't understand it, just play them that one. Okay, well, let's see. Part of the Louis Armstrong told us very late in his career, he said, you know, I don't understand a lot of wordology. He said they use phrases like jazz and boogie woogie, and he named a couple of others. And he says, back in my day, it was just all called ragtime. You know, Dixieland is ragtime to him. So and all of these words describing blues and whatnot, you know, these are just categorizing things that came along in years after. But anyways, I'm going to play you some barrel house music. What's a barrel house? Barrel houses were usually illegal dives. Anyone ever been to one of them? No. Illegal dives. Now, what they used to do, and they still do it somewhat, but back in the 1800s and good part of the 1900s, they'd want to open a bar somewhere, but they don't have a license to do it, so they just go out in the swamps. They go out in the woods, up the sides of mountains in the Appalachia. And they'd take a shed or a shack, and they'd stand a couple of barrels up on end like this, two of them, and then they put some boards across, and that became their barrel house. That's where the name came from, and of course these are moonshine joints. They're not going to wait for the Budweiser truck. So they're making White Lightning and Applejack and on and on. So now the barrel, I'm telling you this so you understand the barrel house piano player. I'm going to play you some of their stuff. These guys, the barrel houses were dangerous. They usually hired two piano players. One would play from midnight to noon, and the other from noon to midnight. A lot of gig. These places were wildly dangerous because everyone who was fleeing from the chain gang and prison and whatnot, you know, these guys would show up in the barrel houses because they couldn't go into town. The places where, there's an old song. The song had this line in it that said, well, there were lots of pretty women and pickpockets skilled. And business never closes till someone gets killed. So, that seems to have some barrel house history in it. And so therefore, and this is true, it sounds bizarre, but it's true, there was a rule in all the barrel houses that you couldn't shoot the piano player. Who could they shoot? Anybody else, I guess. So, okay, so now we're coming to the piano playing part. Now that you've got a little barrel house and, knowledge. Okay, so now we're going to pretend, here's your Spring Island music question. How would you imagine that these guys played the piano? Would they play, No. We'll try again. No. These guys were guitar players, like I told you, they're folk musicians. They played rhythm guitar, and they never took piano lessons, so when they started playing pianos, they'd play the same rhythms that they had on the guitar. Real easy to do this on a guitar, a lot of rhythm. So then these guys would make up wild things with their rhythm, this rhythm piano. So this style, we've traced this back to 1871, Marshall, Texas. Powerful boogie-woogie players. They didn't come up with the name boogie-woogie until 1927. I'll play you some of this stuff, the early barrel house sounding. Now I know some of you are musicians. That's just a C major chord played in rhythm. But you're likely to hear the right hand playing in a different key. So, C minor, that was. Oh, and what are the rhythms like in the 3-4, 1, 2, 3, 4? did. If it fits, it works. End of story. Daryl knows that. Here's one of them. That's the first 4 minutes of your 12-hour gig. Oh, Nick, you asked me to play this too. The blues. Everybody knows the blues when you hear it. They're always downers, you know. Blueses are never about happy topics. You never hear somebody singing, "I just got me a brand new Lamborghini Blues." downtrodden. This tune fits the picture perfectly. The name of this is Trouble in Mind. Trouble in Mind. Got kind of a pretty little melody that goes to it. But this tune is kind of musically important. One of the reasons is because it's weird. How can something that's pretty be weird? Well, now the first time I ever heard this tune, I was playing with a Dixieland band right there along the Detroit River. I grew up in Michigan. Early 70s, I'm playing with this Dixieland group. They started playing this tune, and I didn't know it, so I just sat there and strummed along with them. And the clarinet player, Mr. Walter Gower, he picked up the microphone and he sang all 17 verses to this thing. It was a very long night. I'm not going to do that to you, don't worry.
Sing one.
Well, here's how it starts. It doesn't start off so bad. It goes like this. Trouble in mind, I'm blue. But I won't be blue always. It's 'cause the sun's gonna shine in my backyard someday. Yeah. In my backyard. All alone at midnight. The lamp is growing low, growing low. I ain't never seen so much trouble before. We're gonna skip over verse 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. We're gonna move up here to verse number 11. I got no idea how they come up with this. I'm gonna lay my head on some lonesome railroad track. When that 250 comes on, Lord, I'm gonna yank it back. Then there's a couple more useless verses. Now we're going to fast forward up to verse 15 or 16, one of them. This is not a repeat. They seem to have got carried away with their wisdom, I guess. I'm going to lay my head on some lonesome railroad line. Let that 657 train satisfy my mind. I got trouble in mind. I'm blue. Well, I won't be blue always. And the sun's gonna shine in my backyard someday. Sweet mama, I said the sun's gonna shine in my backyard someday. Oh, brutal. A lot of what I learned, I think I mentioned that I learned from listening to player pianos a lot. My first job as a piano player was it was in 1964, and I got a job playing the piano in a German beer hall in Detroit called a Rascal. You should stay. Well, you have been there. So I played German songs, 5, 6 hours a night, and you know, and a lot of other things mixed in with it. But they had a player piano in the place, as well as the piano that I played in. Back in 1964 and 65, I was walking in there, and this player piano was playing 1,000 notes a minute, and I was just starting with this. So I was trying to figure out how in the world could anybody play like that thing. And so, yeah, could I have one of those glasses of water?
Sure.
Thank you so much. Thanks a lot. Excuse me. Thanks. So I was trying to imitate the player piano for probably a year went by, and the customers were yelling nice things to me. This one guy would say, "Keep going, Bob, you're gaining on it." And the thing was over there just playing like a tyrant. And so I was trying to imitate the thing, like I said, and then finally, after about a year or so, the guy took me over to the piano and he says, "Bob, do you know what you're doing?" He says, "Look at this piano roll." And he showed me the end of the box. I said, "Well, okay, I know that tune, and who are those 3 guys? Did they write it or something?" He says, "No, those 3 guys are playing that roll." So that's one of my early piano lessons, was that 2 or 3 guys would be playing the piano rolls. But at any rate, I wanted to play this one tune. It's called Ida, Sweet as Apple Cider. The tune comes from 1904. Saying that was so much easier before all this global warming stuff. Oh my goodness. Well, player pianos, of course. Well, I'll tell you a true story. The player pianos were involved in this. I gotta put this thing up here a little bit more. It keeps. Get up here. There. We're gonna go back to 1899. You guys have probably heard of Tin Pan Alley. That was 28th Street in New York. There's about a walk down 28th, it was like walking through a Tin Pan Alley. One of the alleymen was a guy named Harry Von Tilzer. He wrote music and he published music. And he was good. One day in 1899, a friend of his, a guy named Albert Lamb, was walking in his door and he says, "Harry, my friend," he says, "I have visited a den of iniquity." So Harry said, "Tell me about it." He said it was around 1871. He visited this place out in Tombstone, Arizona. He said it was a wild bar filled with drunken cowboys. It was called the Bird Cage Saloon. It's still there, by the way. It's a national historical monument. Harry said, "Tell me about this place. What happened?" And his friend says, "Well," he says, "I went in there. Like I said, drunken cowboys, they were blowing their guns off through the ceiling, through the walls." This is all true. They blew a hole through the bar with a .45. That hole is still there. The cowboys were drinking, smoking cigars, and gambling, and cursing, and they were foul. There was a man in there who they feared, whose name was Doc Holliday. The guy went on to describe this place, and he said, down at the far end of the dance floor, he said there was an old stage, an old out-of-tune piano. And women would get up on the stage, young women, and they would put their hands together like this. And they would sing pitiful songs. And when they would sing, the cowboys would stop drinking and stop gambling. They would turn and they would look at these fallen angels. You know what they're thinking here. You know what kind of place this is. On the train coming back, I was forced to write poetry, and I give you my poem right now, Harry, even though it's years later. And I ask you if you can write music to the song, to the poem that I wrote about the birdcage saloon. So Harry put the poem up on his old tinny piano, and he looked at the words, and the melody came to him. She's only a bird in a gilded cage. Beautiful sight to see. You may think that she's happy and free from care. She's not as though she seems to be. Oh, it's sad when you think of her wasted life, for her beauty will do as they eat. that story did actually come about, and yeah, the Birdcage Saloon out there has got a copy of the original Bird in the Gilded Cage, framed, of course, in there. And just for your curiosity mongers, your trivia people, the Birdcage Saloon, a bird was their an 1800s expression for a foxy lady. Let's see what we have here. Oh, the most powerful boogie in the world is a thing called the honky-tonk train blues. This came out of Chicago in 1922. Why isn't it called a boogie? Because they didn't invent the phrase boogie woogie until 5 years later, 1927. They used to call these things blueses. All right, the honky-tonk train blues has been recorded over and over and over. It's a powerful driving thing. I'm going to play it here in a moment. But I wanted to tell you a little story about it first. There's an outstanding recording that was made of this thing in 1983, and it was made by none other than Clint Eastwood. And you've heard it now. Yeah, he does a good job on it. Clint made a movie called The Honky Tonk Man, and he plays the role of an aging piano saloon player going around. And just a little bit of background to that, Clint is a very good piano player. In the 1950s, he was trying to get into the movies in Hollywood, and to support himself, he was playing the piano 6-7 nights a week all over the area. So now in 1983, of course, he's in the movies, and he makes this movie called The Honky Tonk Man. You can see him playing this next tune I'm going to play right in that thing. Oh, there's a floozy hanging on the piano, and they really marveled it up. So, 2 summers ago, I was out in California, and I was at a resort that I like to go to, and I was at this thing, and Clint showed up. And so I got a chance to talk to him. And he's very, very nice, and he's very pleasant. He's not trying to pull away from you because he's got somewhere else to go. No, he's got all the time you need for him. So we're talking about pianos, and I said to him, Clint, I said, I think you played the honky-tonk train in that movie of yours. He said, yeah. He said, I did. And he was happy that someone wasn't accusing him of cheating and faking it. So then we talked for a while, and he was going to go one way, me another. And I said, before you leave, I said, I got a little story I want to tell you. I said, it involves that lodge that's down in Big Sur, and he knew exactly what it was, an old log lodge with an old piano in it. So he says, yeah, he says, I know that place. I said, well, I was playing that piano in there. And the lady that owns it told me that you would come there with your friends and play the piano. He says, yeah, I did. I said, well, I left you one of my cards there a couple of years ago. And he says, well, I didn't remember getting it. I said, well, no, you didn't. I said, because I left you a card, and me and Linda went outside, got an art card, and I chickened out, and I went back inside and took it away. So he says, why did you do that? So I said, well, I've always known that you were a piano player. I said, so when she told me that you played this piano, I pulled out one of my cards and I wrote on the back of it, hey Clint, new piano in town. Says you can't play. Come on down, make my day. So he breaks up laughing. He says, why did you leave that? He said, I would have loved it. So he insisted I pull out another card and write it for him. So I did. And he asked me why I was scared to leave it. I said, well, of course I didn't know how you'd react. I didn't want to insult the guy. I said, I was actually afraid that I'd be at my home back in Michigan. It would be a dark and stormy night. And I would hear, I'd open the door, and there would be one of these characters of yours, William Money from Unforgiven. Dirty Harry, and he'd be standing there with a hat and the rain coming out. He'd look at me and he'd say, you, turn me off. So I couldn't do it. But anyway, enough of that. Here is the tune that you can hear Clint Eastwood playing in that movie. It's a Honky Tonk Man. This is called the Honky Tonk Train Blues. old original blues is the slow stuff. They don't even need words to let you know that they're sad tunes. I want to play a thing here called the Louisiana Blues. Towel around here. Can I have that napkin? Yeah, that would. Wow. Thank you. Put this in here where it can't get away. Dixieland. Dixieland, like Louis said, they called it ragtime. By the way, this would be interesting for you guys to know. Do you know where the word Dixie came from? What?
Mason-Dixon line?
No, not the Mason-Dixon line. 1833, the Bank of Louisiana was in the French Quarter of New Orleans, and they issued banknotes. Well, they were a French-speaking bank, so they issued their banknotes with printed in English on the front and French on the back. So their $10 bill said 10 on the front, and it said D-I-X on the back, the French word for 10. Yeah, these. But of course, the people who didn't speak French called them Dixie notes. That kind of the term Dixie. And the Mason-Dixon line is in the northern border of Maryland, and it runs all the way out and across it. And you don't think of Washington, D.C. as being Dixieland. So that, yeah, that's. So at any rate, that's where it came from. So, Dixieland music. You know, when you mention Dixieland, you automatically think of New Orleans. You don't think of Tallahassee or something like that. So here's a tune that Louis Armstrong used to play. There's a type of band in New Orleans called the Parade Band. It's a big Dixieland band, it might be 20 to 30 guys, and the parade bands followed funeral processions. They went out behind a horse and wagon to the cemetery and they played kind of slowly. When they come back into town, they'd play happy. dancing, and they'd celebrate somebody's life. All the weeping time was over. So we call these things return trip parade band tunes, and this tune I'm going to play is one of them. It's called Panama. It's one of the happiest things I ever heard. It goes like this. something. People think that it's hard to play piano, but actually, if you only know 3 chords, you can play the piano. That's C major. That's C. So if you're listening to something in the key of C, you're going to hear a lot of C major being played in it. You're also going to hear a lot of F major and G. Those are 3 chords: C, F, G, and C. That's a C major. It's made up of 3 notes: C, E, and G. Now here then is that G chord I told you about. That's the notes of G major. That's that same C major chord. I just played it an octave lower. So lower that sound. There's that F major chord I mentioned. That's F major. That's C major again. Oh, so you want to hear that part again? That's F right there. That's a C major chord right there. Oh, G major. I've been neglecting that. There it is. That's G major. That's C major. Here's the notes of C major right there. Now here's C major just played 1 note at a time, and then here's G major played 1 note at a time. C major played 1 note at a time. See, there's nothing to it. Now, I'm going to play another tune, and while I'm playing this next tune, you guys, if you got any questions about anything I'm saying, think of a question, and okay, I'll do another tune here from the piano roll files. This tune comes from 1920. It's called "Do You Ever Think of Me?" You might know this tune. But whoever wrote the words to this, I've always thought must have been the doofus. I mean, whoever wrote the words to it, it's a neat melody. But I mean, listen to the words there. When you had another's arms around you, do you ever think of me? Now, does anyone have a question? If I don't see you, yell at me. It's like, oh, here's one.
I see the piano jumping around as you're playing. I'm just wondering if you've ever had one collapse.
Yeah. Yeah, we've had pianos collapse. I've had piano benches break in half. I've ended up on the floor. And one time in one of the bars I used to play at in the Detroit area, the piano, it was missing its back 2 casters. And so they had some little squares of 2x4s stuck in there. And busboys knocked them out or something, but I was playing it and the thing went over on its back. I've had strings break. One time one of the 9-foot strings down at the bass blew up while I was on a concert stage. And I thought somebody had fired a shotgun off. But anyways, I kept playing, and when I got done, here's a string, you know. It took those bolt cutters to get it out of there. So, yeah, we've had all kinds of horror shows happen. If I don't see and you have a question, yell at me, because I can't see every direction here at once. Anybody else?
Did you play Little Fats Waller?
Fats Waller? Well, he was a little after the... I don't know any of his stuff. Oh, did he write this one?
Oh, yeah.
Can you describe for us the difference between stride, ragtime, and its boogie-woogie somewhere in the middle?
When I described to you the difference between ragtime and boogie-woogie and a style that was known as the Harlem stride, stride with the walk. Stride refers to the left hand striding up and down the keys. Now that was one of the terms that Louis said was a new term to him. And for instance, if you hear, I'll emphasize the left hand on something. Sometimes there'll be no melody, just a lot of striding. Because that's what striding is. And some of those things are pretty fast striding, but that was actually a form of ragtime because the melodies are in between the beats. So they call it ragtime. Boogie woogie is of course a driving bass of some sort. But then the rhythms of on the top hand of boogie woogie are in between the beats again, so they called it ragtime too. That's syncopated stuff going on in the right hand. So that was another one of the things that Louis said, I don't understand why they changed all these names. Yeah, there's a question.
Would you play another Scott Joplin?
Well, I only know 2 or 3. He wrote this in 1902 as well. For ragtime, by the way. Joplin lived in St. Louis at the time, and this tune, as you know, is called The Entertainer. But then we did some digging. We found some of his old business cards from the 1800s, 1890s. And on those cards it says, Master Scott Joplin, the entertainer. So he appears close, so you can hear the right hand is in front of the left. Sometimes we play it in the style of the Phantom of the Opera.
I understand that you have run into heading the calendar forward to Jerry Lee Lewis and a little bit of fire and all that, and I think we'd like to hear about that.
I've never met Jerry Lee Lewis.
But I thought that you,
No, I didn't.
JJ, you had told me.
No, he's going to be on the cover of.
I'm on the
Keyboard.
front cover of a Keyboard magazine this month, and Jerry Lee's picture is on it, and they've done an article on him and an article about me. So my name is over on the side, and there's a picture of him, you know, burning the piano. So,
I thought you two should have met. I mean, it would have been very interesting.
You played Carolina Shout.
oh, Carolina Shout on. Got great questions. Anybody else?
You know the Spring Island Blues?
What was that?
Spring Island Blues.
Spring Island Blues. We'll write that one. What was that? Oh, well, Boogie Woogie Bugle Boy of Company B. Then no, I don't really do that one. That one's after my time. Anybody else with a question about this stuff?
Thank you.
Well, tell me about it.